Breaking the isolation cycle. Rachel used to be the social butterfly of her office. Coffee dates, group dinners, weekend hiking trips. She was always organizing something or saying yes to invitations. Then her dog Cooper died unexpectedly at age 6. Heart failure. No warning signs. 3 months later, Rachel's calendar is empty. Her phone sits silent. Her coworkers have stopped asking if she wants to join lunch outings because she always says no. I feel like I'm living behind glass, she tells me. I can see everyone else living their normal lives, but I can't reach them. And honestly, I don't want to try. It's easier to be alone than to pretend I'm okay. The isolation of pet grief. Rachel is doing what 75% of pet owners do after losing a beloved companion. She's grieving in isolation. And while it feels safer in the short term, isolation actually makes everything harder. It compounds the pain. It distorts your thinking. It convinces you that you're the only one who's ever felt this bad. Today we're going to understand why grief drives us into hiding, how isolation actually prolongs suffering, and most importantly, how to create what I call a sacred grief container that gives you safety without complete withdrawal from the world. Moving beyond avoidance. Over the past 2 lessons, we've established that your grief is sacred and we've mapped your emotional triggers. But here's what often happens next. Armed with this new awareness, many people retreat even further into isolation. They think, now that I know my triggers, I'll just avoid everything that might set me off. But here's the problem with that strategy. Life is full of pet reminders. If you try to avoid all your triggers, you end up avoiding life itself. And isolation, while it feels protective, actually becomes another trap that keeps you stuck in grief instead of moving through it. Today, we're going to break that cycle and create a grief container that's both safe and connected. The isolation impulse is normal. First, let's understand why isolation feels so appealing when you're grieving a pet. When you lose your beloved companion, your nervous system goes into protection mode. You feel raw, vulnerable, like you're walking around without skin, and the world suddenly feels full of people who don't understand what you're going through. So your brain says, let's just stay home. It's safer here. No one can hurt us with insensitive comments or confused looks when we tear up talking about our pet. This impulse makes perfect sense. You're trying to protect your tender heart from additional wounds. But here's what research shows us. While some temporary withdrawal is normal and even healthy after a loss, prolonged isolation actually increases depression, anxiety, and something called complicated grief, where the grieving process gets stuck. Why does this happen? The dangers of grief in isolation. When you're alone with your grief, a few dangerous things occur. Your thoughts become an echo chamber. Without other perspectives, your mind can spiral into catastrophic thinking. I'll never feel better. No one understands. I should be over this by now. These thoughts bounce around unchallenged. Your pain feels uniquely intense. Isolation tricks you into believing that your grief is somehow different, more severe, or more lasting than anyone else's. You lose perspective on the normal range of grief responses. You lose access to comfort and support. Humans are wired for connection, especially during difficult times. When you cut yourself off, you're literally depriving yourself of one of the most powerful healing resources available. Your world shrinks. The more you avoid, the smaller your life becomes. Soon, even simple activities feel overwhelming because you're out of practice dealing with normal life while grieving. So while the isolation impulse is completely understandable, staying there too long actually works against your healing. The hidden costs of grief isolation. Let me paint you a picture of how isolation compounds grief in ways you might not realize. Sleep gets worse. When you're alone with your thoughts, especially at night, grief feels more intense. Your mind has nothing else to focus on, so it replays memories, regrets, and what-ifs on an endless loop. Many isolated grievers develop insomnia or sleep disturbances. Daily functioning deteriorates. Without social structures and commitments, it becomes easier to skip meals, avoid exercise, neglect personal care, and abandon healthy routines. These sound like small things, but they add up to feeling worse physically, which makes the emotional pain harder to bear. Relationships suffer. Friends and family members often don't know how to respond to prolonged withdrawal. They might assume you want space, or they might feel hurt that you're not accepting their support. Over time, even well-meaning people stop reaching out, which confirms your belief that no one understands. Work performance drops. Grief brain is real. It affects concentration, memory, and decision-making. When you're also isolated, you don't have colleagues checking in, offering help, or providing the gentle structure that can help you function during difficult times. Grief gets distorted. This is the big one. In isolation, normal grief responses can become exaggerated. You might start believing that your intense sadness means you're broken, or that missing your pet this much is somehow pathological. Without other perspectives, you lose the understanding that what you're experiencing is actually quite normal. Maria's story, the power of connection. Here's a story that illustrates this perfectly. Maria isolated herself for 4 months after her cat, Luna, died. She convinced herself that crying every day meant she was having a nervous breakdown. She started Googling how long should pet grief last and found conflicting information that made her more anxious. When she finally joined a pet loss support group, she discovered that everyone there had cried daily for months, some for over a year. Suddenly, her response didn't seem crazy. It seemed like love. That's the power of connection during grief. It normalizes your experience and helps you understand that intense love creates intense grief. The sacredness paradox. Here's something that might surprise you. You can honor the sacred nature of your grief and stay connected to the world. These aren't mutually exclusive. Many people think that sacred grief requires complete withdrawal, like going into a monastery of sadness. But that's not how sacred space actually works. Think about it this way. Churches, temples, and other sacred spaces aren't isolated from the world. They exist within communities. People come and go. Life happens around them. But they maintain their sacred nature through intentional practices and boundaries. Your grief can work the same way. You don't need to shut out the entire world to honor your pet's memory or protect your healing process. You need what I call sacred grief boundaries, clear guidelines for how you engage with others while you're in this tender time. Sacred grief boundaries. For example, you can go to dinner with friends and ask them not to suggest getting another pet right away. You can return to work and take breaks when you need to cry. You can engage in social activities and excuse yourself early if you feel overwhelmed. You can accept support and ask people to follow your lead on when you want to talk about your pet. The key is conscious choice rather than total avoidance. When you create sacred boundaries instead of complete walls, you get the protection you need without losing connection to the healing power of community. Building your sacred grief container. Now, I want to teach you how to create what I call a sacred grief container. This is a framework that provides safety and support for your grief without cutting you off from the healing power of connection. Think of it like a greenhouse for your grief, a protected environment where your healing can happen, but one that still allows light and air to flow through. The 4 layers of your sacred grief container. Layer 1, your inner sanctuary. This is your private, sacred space where you can grieve without any outside input. This might be a specific room or corner of your home, your journal and grief practices, solo time in nature, meditation or prayer time. This layer is completely yours. No one else gets access without invitation. Layer 2, trusted inner circle. These are 1 to 3 people who get it. They understand pet loss grief, they don't judge your timeline, and they offer support without trying to fix you. This might include a close friend who's also lost a beloved pet, a family member who understands your bond, a therapist or counselor who specializes in pet loss, an online support group where you feel understood. Layer 3, gentle community engagement. This is where you maintain connection to normal life while honoring your grief. Examples include returning to work with modified expectations, attending social events with an exit strategy, engaging in activities that feel manageable, maintaining some routines and commitments. Layer 4, boundary management. This is where you protect your container from people or situations that feel harmful to your healing. This includes scripts for handling insensitive comments, permission to leave events early, guidelines for what support you want versus what you don't, clear communication about your needs. The beauty of this container is that it's flexible. On hard days, you might spend most of your time in layers 1 and 2. On better days, you might engage more with layers 3 and 4. The container expands and contracts based on your needs, but it never completely closes you off from connection. Identifying your support needs. The final piece of breaking the isolation cycle is getting clear about what kind of support actually helps you versus what makes things worse. Many people avoid connection because they've had bad experiences with well-meaning people who said the wrong thing. But instead of avoiding everyone, you can get specific about what you need. Helpful versus harmful powerful support. Support that usually helps people who listen without trying to fix, friends who follow your lead about when to talk about your pet, family members who acknowledge your loss was significant, others who've been through similar experiences, people who offer practical help, meals, errands, without emotional demands. Support that usually hurts people who minimize your loss. It was just a pet. Friends who push you to move on or get over it. Family members who suggest immediate replacement pets. Others who make your grief about them. I know exactly how you feel. People who offer unsolicited advice about your grieving process. Once you're clear about what helps and what hurts, you can start to seek out the first kind and protect yourself from the second. This doesn't mean cutting off everyone who's ever said something insensitive. It means getting selective about who you turn to for grief support and setting boundaries with people who aren't equipped to help in this area. Remember, you can love someone and still recognize that they're not the right person to support you through pet loss grief. That's wisdom, not rejection. Summary. Let's recap what we've covered in this crucial lesson about breaking the isolation cycle. The isolation impulse after pet loss is completely normal, but prolonged isolation actually compounds suffering and prevents healing. Isolation creates hidden costs, including sleep problems, deteriorating daily functioning, relationship strain, and distorted thinking about your grief. You can honor the sacred nature of your grief while staying connected. These aren't mutually exclusive. A sacred grief container provides protection and support through layers of sanctuary, trusted circle, gentle engagement, and boundary management. Getting clear about what kind of support helps versus hurts allows you to seek connection strategically rather than avoiding it completely. The goal isn't to get back to normal or pretend you're not grieving. The goal is to grieve with support instead of in isolation, which actually facilitates deeper healing. Clear action step. Your action step for this lesson has 3 parts, and I want you to take your time with each one. Create your sacred grief container blueprint. Using the worksheet in your course materials, identify your inner sanctuary. Where and when will you have private grief time? Your trusted inner circle. Who are 1 to 3 people you can turn to for understanding support? Your gentle engagement plan. What 2 to 3 activities or commitments will you maintain while grieving? Your boundary strategies. How will you protect yourself from unsupportive interactions? Reach out to one person. Choose someone from your trusted inner circle or someone you think could be part of it and make one small connection. This could be a text saying you're struggling with pet loss and could use support, a call to a friend who's also lost a pet, joining an online pet loss support group, scheduling time with a family member who understands your bond. Practice one boundary. Think of a situation where you typically feel pressure to be okay when you're not. Practice one gentle boundary, such as, I'm still grieving my pet, so I might need to leave early. I appreciate your concern, but I'm not ready to talk about getting another pet. I'm having a hard day missing pet's name, so I'm going to take some quiet time. Remember, boundaries aren't walls. They're gates that you control. You are not alone. One of the cruelest aspects of pet loss grief is how it can make you feel completely alone in your pain. But here's the truth. You are not alone. Millions of people have walked this exact path and felt these exact feelings. The key is finding your people, the ones who understand that losing a beloved companion is a real loss that deserves real support. Your pet brought connection and love into your life. Honoring that doesn't require you to cut yourself off from connection and love now. In fact, learning to receive support during this difficult time is one way to honor the open-hearted love they taught you. Tomorrow, we'll begin week 2 and start working on releasing the guilt spiral that often accompanies pet loss. But for today, take one small step toward connection. Your grief is sacred, your healing matters, and you don't have to do this alone. I'll see you in the next lesson.